Okay, so I'll go through how to participate in the chat once we get to the Q&A session, but just wanted to let you know how today's session is being structured. So with that, I have the great honor of introducing Geneva E.D. Thompson, the Assistant Secretary of Tribal Affairs with California's Natural Resource Agency and a partner on the climate assessment. She'll be opening up our meeting today.
Watto, thank you, Patricia. And it's such an honor to be here with you all today. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that the lands and waters of California are the ancestral lands and waters of hundreds of California Native American tribes, and that these lands and waters contain deep, significant cultural and ecological heritage and importance to California Native American tribes. The California Natural Resources Agency, as Patricia said, is one of the partners with the Office of Planning and Research on the 5th Climate Change Assessment. And here at the agency, we're the parent agency over 26 different distinct departments, commissions, and conservancies, which also includes the California Energy Commission, who we'll be hearing from later today. And I'm very honored to be appointed as the first ever Assistant Secretary for Tribal Affairs here at the California Natural Resources Agency, and really see my role as ensuring that our policies and programs are identifying opportunities to partner with tribes and work with tribes on tribal priorities in the natural resources space. This strengthening of partnerships with tribes is with the goal of working together to restore, protect, and manage the natural, historical, and cultural resources within tribal ancestral territories, as well as throughout the state of California. In acknowledgement of California Native American tribes as the original stewards of California's lands and waters, and also the harsh impacts that tribal communities have felt by state-sponsored genocidal policies, which led to violence and forced removal from ancestral lands. We're actively shifting our policies and programs so we can be better partners with California Native American tribes. This can include implementing robust tribal consultation policies that have the goal of early, often, and meaningful consultations with all of our projects and programs that may have an impact to California Native American tribes, as well as this can include funding tribal priorities and ensuring that our funding opportunities are as accessible and easy to navigate as possible, and working through barriers and finding opportunities to collaborate and ensure those tribal priorities are have the opportunity to be part of our collective work, as well as identifying opportunities for increased tribal access and co-management and ancestral land return. Collaborative tribal partners are specifically key when we are assessing and addressing the impacts of the climate crisis. Tribes have deep place traditional ecological knowledge of their ancestral lands and waters and natural resources, and also deep place-based knowledges of how their people live, how their people's lives are interconnected with and rely on the resources for their communities and individuals' health and well-being. The forced removal from ancestral lands has had immeasurable impacts to tribal communities, and these impacts are now being intensified by the climate crisis. So in the spirit of truth and healing, here with the 5th Climate Change Assessment, as well as all of our work across the agency, we hope to be better partners with tribes and support tribal priorities and knowledges as we collectively work to address a changing climate. So I just want to say Watto and thank you for joining us here today. I'm very excited about this conversation to learn more from you on how we can improve our processes and strive to be better partners with your tribe. So with that, I think we wanted to open up the floor and invite tribal chairpersons or council members to unmute yourselves and introduce yourselves however you would like to before we get started. And so if there's any elected leaders who are on the call today, we invite you to unmute and introduce yourselves.
Okay, thank you so much, Geneva. Feel free to let me know if there's somebody trying to come off mute that would like to introduce themselves. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and dive in. Thank you so much for those comments and getting us started on in a good way today, Geneva. It's so wonderful to have everybody on. I would also really like to welcome all other participants to please introduce yourselves in the chat. It really gives everybody an opportunity to know who's in this virtual space. And so we really appreciate you taking the time to introduce yourself in that manner. Okay, with that, I'd like to introduce the interagency fifth assessment team to go ahead and come on video. Briefly introduce yourself and your role, and then popcorn it to a colleague. Attendees, these are folks that you're either going to be hearing from today in the presentation, or if you have some technical issues, you can reach out to throughout the session today. So if y'all can come off video, I will hand it over to Katrina first.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Katrina Lenny Koenig. I'm the Deputy Public Advisor and Tribal Liaison with the Energy Commission. We're really excited to share the grant program with you today, and then also to hear your feedback. I think we're really excited about the opportunity to work with tribes on research around climate change to inform the fifth assessment. So thank you for being here. And with that, I'll pass it to Gabriel.
Good afternoon. My name is Gabriel O'Rourke. I also work for the California Energy Commission. I am the lead for the Tribal Grant Program for the fifth Climate Change Assessment. Welcome. Oh, and Quinby, it's your go.
Thanks. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Quinby Lum. I'm with the California Energy Commission as well. I'm the Tribal Research Grants Manager. And Neil, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. My name is Neil Matuka. I am the Program Manager for California's Fifth Climate Change Assessment. I'm going to pass it to Emily.
Hi, everybody. My name is Emily Anico. I'm a Strategic Engagement Specialist working on the fifth assessment. And I'll pass it over to my colleague, Trey.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Trey Spikes. I am the Research Advisor for the Strategic Growth Council, and I'm happy to be here. And I'm going to pass it back over to Patricia.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for sticking with me through that. I think it's always really important in these virtual spaces for us to know who's on and who we're with. So with that, let's focus on today's agenda. We've already covered welcoming and opening comments. I'll be providing you with a little background an introduction on California's fifth climate change assessment, more broadly to set the stage. I'll then discuss the tribal research program within the assessment, the engagement we've done thus far, and updates to the tribal advisory group. I'm then going to hand it over to my colleagues at California's Energy Commission to go over concepts of the draft grant guidelines. Most of what we're presenting was created based on recommendations from the fourth assessment tribal and indigenous communities report, as well as input that we've received so far from listening sessions, consultations, and other engagement with tribes. So we are in the development stage and are really excited to hear your feedback and input today. So a little bit of background with the passage of SB 1320, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, or OPR, was designated the interagency coordinator of the fifth assessment in very close partnership with CNRA, California Energy Commission, CEC, and California Strategic Growth Council, or SGC. We've hired, as you've heard, a team of devoted staff to oversee the administration and rollout of the fifth assessment. And we have funding and various opportunities to support the development of an extensive suite of cutting-edge research on climate change. So we're not starting from scratch. We're very lucky to be building on a long history of California assessments, starting with the first climate impacts report from the Energy Commission in 1989. Each assessment has built on the previous. The fourth assessment was completed in 2018, and the fifth assessment will be completed in 2026. Okay, so here is the fifth assessment timeline. The main components you can see here, there are a few components here that I'd like to focus on. But first, we really are prioritizing public engagement and outreach. The climate data and scenarios is really that downscale data that's going to help inform the rest of the process. We have core technical reports, which I'll discuss in a minute. The tribal research program, which I will definitely discuss in a few slides. The regional, topical, and statewide synthesis reports. So that just kind of gives a broad overview of the fifth climate assessment. Okay, so the core technical reports is really like climate research, right? So this is where we're looking at our research topic, priorities, what major knowledge gaps exist, and what research we'll be funding. So through a competitive process, this is being led by CNRA, or Natural Resources Agency, and through a competitive process, this program will award research contracts to fill gaps in the state's understanding and adapting to climate change impacts. The awarded research will be in alignment with the state's priority research gaps in climate and equity goals. So we have undertaken, part of our engagement we've done so far, we have undertaken extensive engagement process to help us identify these research gaps and figure out what those goals are. We've had really great input and participation from tribes in this process, and really excited about that list. So the list will be released with the RFP in 2023. And I really wanted to flag this and emphasize this because I do think that there could be some alignment with tribal priorities, and want to make sure that you're aware that this is coming down in the near future. It will be open to all public, private entities, research and academic institutions, public agencies, nonprofits, community organizations, private entities, and of course, tribes. So like I said, we anticipate releasing the request for proposal on this research in early 2023. The announcement of that award is anticipated mid-2023 with final deliverables in the third quarter of 2025. So a couple years to work on that. The interagency fifth assessment team will be hosting a webinar on November 16th. And we'll speak more to this process and those potential opportunities there. I hope somebody on our team could put the registration in the link for me for that webinar. The other thing I wanted to highlight before I move away kind of from the broader fifth assessment timeline are these regional, topical, and statewide reports. So we're considering an appropriate process for inclusion of tribal expertise and traditional knowledge in regional, topical, and statewide reports. Also knowing that there will be a tribal and indigenous communities report. But then what does that consideration of tribal expertise and traditional knowledge look like across the board, right? On all the regional and other topical reports. We will be doing extensive research on that in the beginning of 2023, or I'm sorry, engagement on that in the beginning of 2023 as well. So just flagging that for your information and something to consider as we start the new year. Okay, the tribal research program. So the fourth assessment in 2018, like I said, was the first time there was a focus on tribes with the Tribal and Indigenous Communities Report. Due to the success of that report, this program was built. Our goal with the tribal research program is to make sure that it's meaningful and respectful to tribes, really lifting up the great work that's already being done and supporting tribally led research moving forward. We really hope, as Geneva said, to truly create partnerships with tribes in the state's very important climate change work. We've built this program based on lessons learned from the fourth assessment, as well as engagement and consultation since July of 2022, continuing to hear and listen to feedback. So it's an ongoing and adaptive process. We are prioritizing early, frequent, and meaningful consultation with California Native American tribes. So that's the first thing you see here on our timeline. Other components of the tribal of the tribal research program is a tribal advisory group. Tribal advisory group is comprised of representatives from California tribes to guide the tribal research program, providing advice through the 4 years on topics such as ensuring research priorities are meaningful and beneficial to tribes, amongst many other areas that they'll be providing advice on. The next one you see here in the green are the tribal grant program. This one is what we're focusing the rest of our session on today. It's administered by the Energy Commission and will support tribal participation, capacity, and encourage tribally led research. And you'll see traditional ecological knowledge or traditional knowledges and tribal expertise. Consideration of this in the 5th assessment report, where meaningful for tribes and culturally appropriate. A lot of discussions to be had still on that. And then the tribal synthesis report, similar to the 4th assessment, there will be a tribal and indigenous communities report that will assess climate impacts to tribal communities statewide. So that's a lot of the background, what the program is, kind of setting the stage a little bit. And I'd like to take the next couple slides to just talk with you some of the discussions we've had and some of the work we've done so far before I hand it over to my colleagues at CEC to discuss the grant program. So we sent letters respectfully requesting consultation to tribal leaders in late June, early July of 2022. We since have engaged in consultation with 6 tribes, have had several informal engagement and information sharing meetings with other tribes, many other tribes. We've held listening sessions in July, and we've presented at several tribal conferences and consortium meetings. Throughout these discussions, we've really focused on how can we build this program to be meaningful for tribes. And so that's still the question, right, we have moving forward. We focused our discussion on tribal needs for the advisory group, approach to working with tribes on traditional knowledges, and the tribal research grant program. So we did hear a lot of varying input from tribes on the tribal advisory group, some in support and others concerned about a potential bureaucratic process that might not work well for tribes. We did have some tribes express that they prefer government to government consultation over the advisory group format. We had other tribes that really saw it as providing resources in a way and an avenue for them to be able to participate in a avenue that they wouldn't have been able to participate before. So we really did hear a lot of varying input. Given everything that we heard, we did decide we are moving forward with this group. I just want to emphasize that it's not going to replace government to government consultation. We are continuing that throughout the span of the 5th assessment as there's interest. We really hope to get creative and make sure that this advisory group and this process is one that works for tribes as well as the state. So we have a lot, we have some discussions and a lot of work to do there. We did go through a nomination process starting in July of 2022, ending just recently. We're really thrilled to have a great group of nominations. I wish I had more to share with you now. We are in internal reviews and are so excited to announce that group once final selections have been made. So stay tuned. Hopefully it'll be within the next month and maybe it'll align pretty closely with our grant solicitation. We also did do some engagement on tribal expertise and traditional knowledge. Also flagging, we have a lot more to discuss to have a better understanding of what this means in consideration with the climate assessment. Our goal here first, and based on all the feedback that we received from tribes and some of the concerns or the input that we received, is first to protect tribal data sovereignty and knowledge holders, to lift up the great work that is already being done within tribal communities, but to do so in a non-extractive way. So these are really our goals, and what we've heard rise to the top in the conversations we've been having so far with tribes. We will be reaching out more in spring of 2023 and anticipate additional funding for this work, as well as a lot more discussion. So stay tuned for that as well. And then with that, I have the great pleasure of handing the presentation over to Gabriel to get us started on the tribal research grant.
All right, thanks very much, Patricia. Hello again. We're now going to present an overview of the Tribal Research Grant Program. In this phase of the presentation, I'm going to cover some ideas that we have about the program's purpose, eligibility, funding amounts, and the types of grants. And with that, please advance the slide. The purpose of this solicitation is to provide funding for tribally led climate change research to support traditional knowledges and similar projects deemed to be a priority by tribal applicants. The information gathered from this research will help inform tribal synthesis reports, topical reports, and regional reports to guide the 5th climate change assessment and resiliency planning, with respect for the confidentiality and data sovereignty values of the grant recipients. Next slide, please. As far as grant eligibility, these are the entities that we think should be eligible for grants. The solicitation is open to all California Native American tribes, tribal serving non-governmental organizations, and other California tribal organizations. I'm going to define what we think about those terms so that it's clear who may apply, and later on, if necessary, maybe you could amplify this. So we have, of course, California Native American tribes, which include federally and non-federally recognized tribes on the Native American Heritage Commission list. California tribal organizations include organizations controlled, sanctioned, or chartered by a California Native American tribe and subject to the laws of the tribe, the state of California, or federal law. Tribal serving organizations, on the other hand, are consultants and non-governmental organizations that serve tribes, but may not be controlled or chartered by those tribes. Next slide, please. We'll talk about available funding. As you can see here, we conceive of the grant program as having 3 rounds. The timeframes are given on the slide. There's up to $3.625 million available for grants awarded under this solicitation. And we estimate that per round that we will award between 1 million and 1.4 million. That is just an estimate, though. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Should say grant types. There we go. Apologies. So we proposed 3 funding levels, up to $20,000 for small grants, $100,000 for medium grants, and $200,000 for large grants. Diverse activities could be covered by grants from this program. And so here are a few examples by grant type. In the small category, grants could include single subject focused research, such as fire management. Medium grants might tackle more than one climate change topic, say fire management, flooding, and plantings to prevent erosion. Large grants could support something very ambitious, such as a tribally led knowledge sharing program about climate change topics and traditional ecological knowledge. In addition to those examples, any of the grant types could provide match funding for another topically related grant that a tribe has, but that's not funded through this program. Now we'll move on to project categories. There are currently 6 project categories identified for funding. Each project must align with at least one of these groups. If more than one group applies to your project, we ask that you identify one primary group and one or more additional secondary groups. All applications will be evaluated, scored, and ranked against all other applications submitted within the same grant round. And now for the groups. Group 1 are research grants, topic-specific research grants. They may focus on one or more climate change topics of concern to the tribe. Applications in Group 1 can propose research on traditional knowledge, climate change impacts, or climate change responses and mitigation. In Group 2, we have our assessment grants. They consist of tribal climate assessments that focus on a specific geographic area on tribal lands or areas that affect tribal lands or members. Climate assessments may be as narrow or as broad as the applying tribe requires. In Group 3, we have implementation grants, including climate change adaptation and mitigation projects. You might think of this as boots on the ground sorts of grants. Implementation grants shall identify the climate change impacts that the project would address, the geographic area under consideration, and description of adaptive or mitigative activities. In Group 4, we have information sharing grants, purpose of which is to maintain and advance practical and culturally relevant knowledge in both traditional and Western scientific practices. Group 4 grants are intended to improve and support knowledge sharing within tribes, among tribes, and between tribes and agencies, at least as tribes deem appropriate. Information sharing grants shall focus on communicating climate change research or traditional knowledges. Group 5 covers tool development grants to address imbalances in tribal access and use of climate change data by developing the tools to bridge those gaps. Some examples could include tracking the condition of culturally significant plant stands in a geographic information system, or creating user guides for complex databases. Finally, we can't think of everything, so we have Group 6, Other. We encourage applicants that have climate-related proposals that don't clearly fit into Groups 1 through 5 to submit applications under Group 6. These submissions can include the implementation of traditional knowledges that have no or few parallels in Western science traditions, but that accord with tribes' understanding and knowledge of human-environment interactions. I'll now hand the presentation over to Quenby Lum to discuss our thinking about application requirements, evaluation, and timelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. So first, I'll be discussing the application requirements. Each applicant is expected to complete and include these following documents. Number 1 is the application form. This includes basic applicant information, such as which project group your proposal falls in and the funding amount requested. Number 2 is the project narrative. This is where you give an overview of your project, describing what you'll be doing and why it's important. Number 3 is the project team. These are your team members, and you'll want to include any subrecipients or subgrantees that you anticipate working with. Next, we have the scope of work and schedule. The scope of work is a detailed description of who will be doing the work and how the work will be carried out. The schedule describes a timeline for when the work will be completed. And the key difference between number 2, the project narrative, and number 4, the scope of work, is that the project narrative gives a general overview of your project, whereas the scope of work gives a detailed description of who will be doing the work and how and when the work will be completed. Next, we have the budget. This includes your estimated costs and expenditures for the proposed project. And I'm going to jump down to number 8, the environmental compliance form. This is required from all applicants. It asks the applicant to identify whether the proposed project will cause any foreseeable environmental impacts. And lastly, we have previous work products if applicable. So we highly encourage and recommend applicants to submit any relevant previous work products if you have them. This is especially important for group number 3 with the project implementation grants, as we like to see relevant work leading up to the point of now being ready for implementation. We understand that not everyone may have previous work products, and we want to be open to all applicants. So we will accept submissions without previous work products. But again, if you have them, we highly recommend that you include them, especially for group number 3. Next slide, please. So we'll be accepting both electronic and hard copy proposal submissions. The California Energy Commission has an electronic submission system that is available at gss.energy.ca.gov. First-time users must register as a new user to access the system, and a detailed PDF of instructions on how to use the grant solicitation system can be found at that second link on this slide. If you plan to submit electronically, we encourage you to register early and take a look at the instructions to familiarize yourself with what to expect in this submission process. And more information and assistance with the electronic submission process will be provided in subsequent workshops and meetings that we plan to hold prior to the solicitation deadline. If you prefer to submit a hard copy of your proposal, they may be mailed in or dropped off in person. Hard copy submissions must be delivered to the California Energy Commission's Contracts, Grants, and Loans Office by 5 p.m. of the due date. Unfortunately, postmark dates of mailing, email, and fax submissions will not be accepted in whole or in part. And all applications must be received before the deadline stated in the grant funding opportunity. Applications received after the specified date and time will be considered late and not accepted. And if you submit a hard copy, there's no need to submit a hard copy if you submit electronically, because it may just cause confusion as to which proposal you'd like us to look at. So next slide, please. So how will your application be evaluated? We anticipate having an application screening process to ensure that all of the applications that we receive do meet the minimum of requirements, that we receive them by the deadline, and that all required forms are submitted, and all submissions are from eligible applicants. The 4 criteria that you see here will be evaluated on a pass or fail basis. And for example, some reasons for disqualification include late submissions, incomplete submissions, or ineligible applicants. So please be sure to read all of the instructions carefully and complete the application as requested before the deadline. Next slide, please. So how will your application be evaluated? For application scoring, we currently have 5 scoring criteria for evaluating proposals. Number 1 is the need for or value of the proposed work. Number 2 is the climate, resilience, and energy goals related to the proposal. Number 3 is the scope of work and proposed tasks. 4 are the team qualifications, and 5 is the budget and cost effectiveness. Your proposal documents will be evaluated with these scoring criteria, and a minimum of 70 points is required in order to be considered for funding. Next slide, please. This is what our tentative program timeline currently looks like for grant round 1. We're aiming to release the draft solicitation later this month to begin a public comment period before releasing the final solicitation in January 2023. We'll continue holding additional pre-application workshops and meetings in January through April 2023 before the application deadline. We anticipate that the deadline will be sometime in April 2023. The exact date has not been determined yet. Then we'll post the proposed awards around June or July 2023. The proposed awards need to be approved at a California Energy Commission business meeting, which is anticipated to take place July through September 2023. And the agreement development phase will also be taking place during this time with an anticipated agreement start date in October 2023. The agreement end date is to be determined depending on the nature and scope of the proposed project, but the final invoice deadline will be in March 2026 to ensure that all payments are made before the funds expire. Next slide, please. So now I'll turn it back over to Patricia for our Q&A session.
Great. Thank you so much, Gabriel and Quimby. So now we've really reserved the rest of this time to hear from you. Everything that we've